So today we're going to go over some of the simple ways to check for leaks and then some simple ways how to fix leaks in a freeze drying machine. One of the biggest leak points is actually just a virtual leak. And so when you're at vacuum, the ability for water to look like a leak is pretty high. So basically when water is boiling off or some other chemical, it could be alcohol, can look like a leak in the machine. One way that you can make sure that it's not that is just making sure that your food is completely frozen, that there's no water on the inside of the food when you start pulling a vacuum. You can make sure that there's no water in the chamber. And then the big culprit is typically water in the vacuum hose. This is one area where you will not get, this will not freeze necessarily. And so this can be a huge pain point. And so just make sure that this is fully drained. So another area of a virtual leak is not just water, but also just the defrost. So what can happen is if you're pulling a vacuum and you stop the refrigeration, it can actually cause a virtual leak. And so if you are refrigerating and vacuuming, and then all of a sudden you stop refrigerating, it will cause the vacuum pressure to spike a little bit because all that water that was condensed around the outside of the chamber, it will start to melt a little bit and it'll start to off-gas more. And so what we like to do here at Blue Alpine is if we're going to do some sort of test for a leak, we start with an ultimate vacuum test, and that's where you pull a vacuum and a refrigeration cycle. But then if you went off and if you did a ultimate vacuum test where you're doing refrigeration and vacuum, and then you go back and you turn off the refrigeration and you try to do a leak rate test, that leak rate test might fail because it's now got water melting off the chamber. So that's virtual leaks. The next one is the gasket. Here at Blue Alpine, we ship our machines with these little orange zip ties, and some people like to just cut them and then cut off the zip tie. But that is not the correct way to do it. You actually have to remove the entire zip tie because right now, if we pulled the vacuum on this machine, it would leak because there is a small little baby zip tie behind it. And we've seen that before. So you want to make sure that that is totally removed. Additionally, I've seen it where dog hair or human hair can get behind this, and just a little bit of human hair or dog hair can cause that same issue. And so if you're having leaks, you can either clean this groove out with alcohol or water, visually inspect and make sure that there's nothing inside of it. If that's all clean, you put that back on. Sometimes the door can be not adjusted correctly. When we ship the machines such that this black ring, this gasket, is got sealing most of the way around. It can have a little areas where it's not sealing, but if these areas where it's not sealing, if those areas are too big, then it will not start a vacuum. And so, and that can happen during shipping sometimes. So sometimes the door will get jostled during shipping. Sometimes the door, when you're lifting it into positions, people will hold onto the door in order to put it in order to lift it. And that can cause the door to shift a little bit, which can cause these gaps to open up such that it will never pull a vacuum. One way to fix that is if you're going to pull a vacuum, or if you're having a vacuum leak, you can pull a vacuum. So you get a manual hardware control. You can turn on the vacuum pump, and as the vacuum pump is on, you can push on the door. And if just by pushing on the door, if it starts to seal, then it's probably just that the door needs adjusted. The next possible point of a leak is literally just the hoses. Sometimes there can be a cut in a hose. There can be a little bit of dust or again hair or something stuck underneath the hose and the barb. This is pretty simple to do. You just can take your hoses, reset your hoses. After a long period of time, maybe a few years, you might need to recut these hoses. So like essentially take the barb out, cut the hose down a few inches, and then reset the barb. If there's any sort of sharp edges or anything on the barb, that can cause cuts and wear. And so you might need to cut a little off your hose. Same thing on the vacuum pump. The vacuum pump might have a little bit of a leak right here. And so you can same thing, just cut this off and then reinsert it. And same thing on the inside of the machine. There's additional barbs on the other side of both of these hoses. So we have our drain hose, our vacuum hose, and you can check those hoses as well. The next portion of a leak is actually just the drain valve itself. So sometimes this valve sometimes these valves have a little hump that you have to get over in order to close it all the way. And so if it's just barely open at all, it can cause a leak. And you just have to close it just a little bit more. Sometimes these fail, not very often, but sometimes they fail and they need to be replaced. One way that you can check it is you can either put your finger over this over this barb and see if you can pull a vacuum at all. See if your finger gets sucked in at all. If it is, then either the valve isn't closed all the way or the valve is leaking somehow. Another way that you can do this is you can stick this in water, and that can change, if you're pulling a vacuum, that will change the vacuum number on the screen. Another tool that you can do is you can use rubbing alcohol. So literally we use rubbing alcohol to clean the machines here, and so this is what we use, just 91% here in the factory. It is flammable, so you have to kind of make sure that there's no flames or anything nearby, any sparks or anything. But basically you can use alcohol to test to see where the vacuum leak might be. And this will apply to a lot of other things, but right now we'll just do the door. So you'll want to pull a vacuum, so you'll be at a full vacuum as deep as it can go, however many millitorr that might be. And then you'll take alcohol, and you'll literally just squirt alcohol around the door seal, kind of generously, and then if there is a leak around the door seal, once the alcohol gets inside of the vacuum chamber and finds its way through that leak path, then it will make the pressure spike inside the vacuum chamber. So after you've checked for the hoses, if you've already trimmed them down and you suspect that it still might be the hose, same thing with the alcohol. This is just isopropyl alcohol. You can go through and you can squirt a little bit of isopropyl alcohol there, and then watch your millitorrs. Again, this all needs to be under vacuum. But if you're pulling a vacuum and all of a sudden you squirt alcohol and then you see the pressure go down and then up, you'll know, hey, that's where that leak point was. Same thing, you can do it on the fittings. You can squirt a little alcohol on the fittings, and if the leak is there, then it'll find its way through that. And you kind of want to do one at a time and give it a minute. So like you'll do one fitting and then give it a minute, see if it spikes, and then do the next fitting, give it a minute, see if it spikes. Same thing for the vacuum pump. You can take your alcohol and try each of these fittings. Probably try with the lower fitting first, squirt a little alcohol on that. And if there is a leak on the threads, then you'll find that, and then give it a minute, and then you can squirt some alcohol on the hose. Then the alcohol will find that leak there as well. So another place that you can check, once you've checked everything on the outside, you can check it on the inside. Same thing, we're just going to squirt a little alcohol on all the fittings on the inside. So there's this fitting here on the drain. There's fittings in the back for the vacuum, for the pressure sensor, for the feed through. And so you're going to squirt a little alcohol on each of those fittings and give it a minute in between each fitting to make sure that you can see that pressure change if that's where the leak is. The one fix that we like to use, or we like to have customers use, is that if they have a leak, if they've identified, hey, let's say that this fitting right here is leaking on this pump, then what you can do very easily is you can use E6000 and literally, this isn't open, but you can literally just goop the E6000 around that fitting and pull a vacuum on the machine. And so as you're pulling a vacuum, that E6000 will suck into the hole, and it will plug that hole and then dry, and you'll be good. You might need to give it one or two different applications of E6000, but E6000 is soft enough where it's not viscous enough where it'll actually pull into those holes, and it will seal up the vacuum leak. So you're not going to really want to use E6000 on the inside of the machine because there's no need for that. But if you have a little tiny pinhole leak that's giving you 1,000 millitorr of vacuum leak, that little amount of E6000 in that little baby pinhole isn't going to be enough to have any sort of food safety concerns. As long as you're not using E6000 on the inside of the machine and trying to goop the inside of the machine, which you don't want to do. You only want to goop the outside of the machine with E6000. And there should be no food safety concerns with that. And same thing for the vacuum pump and the inside of the machine. If you find the vacuum leak on the inside of the machine on one of these fittings, either here on the bottom or in the back, you just take the E6000 and you just goop it around the fitting, and it will suck into the hole. And you might need one or two applications, but it should suck in and it should plug that hole. E6000 works really well as a way to find the leak and have it suck in and fill that hole. But if you want to take a fitting off and replace it fully, it's a little bit more in depth because you have to take the fitting off, clean the fitting, and then replace the leak lock. This is what we use here in the factory to create a seal around the vacuum pump and the other fittings on the inside of the machine. And so if you want to use this, we sell this on our website. Take the fitting off that's leaking, you clean all the existing gasket material off of the fitting, and then you just apply a generous amount of leak lock and put that fitting back together, make sure it's nice and tight, wait for it to cure, give it about 24 hours to cure, and then recheck your vacuum and see if it's still leaking. So when you're applying the leak lock, you don't want to get any leak lock on the inside of the fitting. You only want to get the leak lock on the outside. And so you're really only going to do a little bit on the outside here. You can add a little bit of leak lock to the inside here, but you don't really want a lot because you don't want the leak lock to go down inside of any sort of fitting. You don't want the leak lock to go down inside the pump. You don't want the leak lock to go down inside the valve. You only want it to be on the threads only. Leak lock also does not apply to the barb itself. So you do not want to put leak lock on this. You only want to put leak lock on threads. You don't want to put leak lock on a KF fitting. So KF fittings require a rubber gasket, not leak lock. And so if it's a KF fitting or a barb, you don't want to use leak lock. You're only going to be using the leak lock on the threaded fittings. The last thing that we're going to talk about is actually a leak internal to the vacuum pump. Let's say you pull an ultimate vacuum test where you're doing refrigeration and vacuum for 2 to 4 hours, and you can't get down to vacuum. It won't pull all the way down. Then what you can do is you can turn off your vacuum and see how fast your pressure rises. And if there is a leak in the vacuum, but not in the rest of the chamber, that leak rate will be good. It'll be small. It'll be like 4 millitorrs per second or maybe 5 millitorrs per second. And basically that's saying that the vacuum pump is not able to pull a deep enough vacuum. If that's the case, then we have some other videos on how to service the vacuum pump, how to service the reed valves, how to clean the vacuum pump with some cleaners, and you can look at those videos on how to do that. Vacuum leaks can be frustrating, but Blue Alpha machines are actually a little easier to find vacuum leaks than other brands that are out there. If you're still having issues, feel free to give us a call. We're more than happy to help walk you through the different steps of how to identify where the vacuum leaks might be. And thanks for watching. We're here to help, and we're glad you're here. Oh, gosh.